All right, taxes. We don't need no stinking taxes. Well, doesn't quite work that way as much as we'd love to think. Unfortunately, we do have to pay taxes in our country, in our state, in our cities. That's how we pay for all of the fun things, or not so fun things in some cases, that we need to have. And we'll get into a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. Let's start with a video.
No, they're where we put them on the flag. If I don't pay my taxes, do I get a timeout?
Do I have to pay taxes on the $2 my grandma gave me? How much will the government give me for my brother?
Why do my parents call me an deductible expense?
Can't you just let them bring the money that they have and work with that?
No.
I mean, seriously, kids are suffering from this. Imagine all those kids that only have a penny,
dramatic
a
on
one,
camera.
just barely anything, barely even clothing. Think about them.
Well, the fact of the matter is, taxes are something that we have to have. And what is it? Here's our definition. I'll read along with you. A mandatory contribution to state revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits, or added to the cost of some goods, services, and transactions. So, in other words, it's money that's going to go back to the government. Now, most people don't like paying taxes. And I'll be honest, I don't like paying taxes either. I'm one of those people who doesn't like doing it. But I will say, from my end on this, I also understand what is going to be done with that tax money. Money that goes into the government doesn't go straight to the people that are working there. Now, that's not to say that people don't get paid, but that money gets used to build roads and to pay people to build roads and to pay people to build defense systems for the military and to pay people to provide services to the people of our country, to provide ambulance services, to provide police, fire protection, to provide schools, public schools, to provide public transportation in large cities, among other things. So there's a lot of different things that we're going to talk about what tax money is used for. It doesn't make it any easier when we got to, look at our paycheck at the end of the month. When we get our paycheck and see a huge chunk of it taken out, or a big chunk of it taken out, that we don't get access to, but sometimes it helps to know where it goes on the back end of this. All right, so that's where we're going to start. Well, let's talk about an income tax. This is money that's taken out of your income, meaning money that you make. Okay, you go to a job, you work, you get paid. That's called income. Okay, incoming. As opposed to outgoing, that's what you're spending. So the government is going to get a cut of the money that you make. And there's a couple different types of taxes that could potentially be taken out. There's the federal income tax, which won't probably apply to you just yet. You probably won't make enough money to actually have to pay in on the federal tax bracket income tax. However, and some of you do have jobs now, when I say that, I'm talking about a job like a Fairway where they take tax out. I'm not talking about like rock picking for the neighbor down the street where they give you a $150 check and there's no taxes taken out on that. I'm not talking about that, because they're not filing taxes on that necessarily. Now, if they do take taxes out, then this would apply. But what you're gonna notice here is that unless you make about $5,000, $6,000 in a year, you're probably going to be able to reclaim all your money at the end of the year, and basically get all your federal income tax back because you don't make enough money. We'll get to more of that here in a little bit. But here's the way this works in the United States right now. We have what's called a progressive tax bracket. The more money you make, the more money you pay. Now, you think, well, geez, doesn't that encourage people to make less money? Well, let me ask you this. Would you rather have more money and have to pay more tax, or have not enough money to live, but you have a really cheap tax. So that's the thing you got to think about with this. The thought process on this comes from this idea: those that have less ability to pay tax. What it's basically saying, and I don't have a drawing here for you, but it's essentially saying, it costs a certain amount of money to live. Let's pretend that amount of money to live is $18,000 for a single person. Well, if I make $19,000 and I have $2,000 taken away in tax, that's going to leave me with $17,000 to live on, which is, according to our number, lower than $18,000 to live. Okay? If I make $100,000 and have $20,000 taken out in tax, I still have $80,000, which is way more than the $18,000 minimum poverty level. Absolutely can't live without it. So that's the idea behind this progressive tax bracketing, where the more you make, the more you pay. Now it changes, and there's all kinds of changes, and of course we're looking at something here that's 12 years old in this picture. Those brackets do change. There has been a push to try to change things out on that. In fact, I believe Iowa went to a straight 4% across the board tax. And again, it seems more equitable to everybody. In a lot of ways it is. But what it also does do is those that are on the bottom end now could potentially struggle. Whereas before, I guess I don't know what their tax bracket was, but anyway, that's one of the things going on, and we call that a flat tax. Again, flat taxes have their benefits. It's very equitable, or at least it seems it outwardly appears equitable that that everybody pays the same percentage. But it has its drawbacks, just like the progressive tax bracket as well.
Taxable income is a really important number to know, and it's an important distinction to make, because a lot of times you may earn a high salary and think you're in a high tax bracket, when in reality you might be in a much lower bracket, and this can affect a lot of planning decisions that you may be making. Let me give you a context of how that works, just to show you the difference between your regular income and what taxable income is. Let's say I make $100,000 a year, and that's my salary. But if I contribute $10,000 to a retirement account at work, for example, like a 401k, oftentimes that number will come off the top. So I was making $100,000, but I contributed some money. Now I reduced my income to $90,000. Then I may have deductions, like a standard deduction or itemized deductions or above the line deductions that could reduce my income further. So let's just say in that example, I have $20,000 of itemized deductions. Now my income is going from $90,000 down to $70,000. So it's very possible that $70,000 is my taxable income. And you can see that's much different from what my full salary was. And the reason that number is so important is because that's the number you end up paying taxes on, not some other number that you're starting with before you're taking into account all of these other things. And so very often people will think they're in a much higher tax bracket than they really are because they're confusing their gross income with their taxable income.
Okay, so just to go back on and talk on that, there's things called a deduction, which is what in that first video, and the kid says, why does mom and dad call me their little tax deduction? That's what they're talking about. Every one of you kids is worth $8,000. That's right. In the United States, dependents, people that are dependent upon somebody else for a living, are worth an $8,000 tax credit. It can only be claimed once. So anybody can claim you as a dependent, sort of. I mean, there are some laws in that. But like your grandparent could claim you as a dependent if you stayed with them, but then nobody else could claim you as a dependent. Only one person can claim you as a dependent. So if your parents claim you as a dependent because you live there, grandpa and grandma can't claim you as a dependent because you've already been claimed. And not that that's how that would work very often, but sometimes that comes up. Okay. Another tax is sales tax, and you can see that this is tax that is collected on the sale of goods. This is a tax that every one of you has paid in your life, because I know every one of you has gone to the store and bought something. Okay? This is the reason why when you buy and this is prices, man, I'm dating myself here, but this is why when you buy a candy bar for $1, it costs you $1.06 or $1.07. Okay? This is why when you buy a $2 pop, it costs you $2.14. So basically what you've got is a sales tax in the state. Now, this gives you this map here gives you an idea of what the percentage of sales tax you're paying in each state. When you look at some of these states in yellow, they have no sales tax. Oregon, Montana, New Hampshire doesn't have one. Delaware doesn't have one. And then Alaska's is only 1.13%. When you look at the highest income or sales taxes, I believe Tennessee is number one. And again, this is from, I don't even know what year this is from. Oh, here we go, 2009. So this is old. These are not accurate to today's numbers. But Tennessee, you were paying almost 10%, 9.5% on the purchase of whatever you did. In Iowa, as you can see, most places you're going to pay 7%. All right. And it comes down to this. Iowa has a 6% sales tax. That money goes back to the state of Iowa, and that money will be used, goes back to the state. A lot of times it's used for school money, among other things. And then there's a 1% loss tax, local option sales tax. And there's other different names for it now. But in other words, the people in a community can vote yes or no. Do we want to have a 1-cent tax to pay for certain things? A lot of towns use that to pay for additional school projects. A lot of other towns will use it to pay for road improvements. Some places will use their lost money for infrastructure upgrades or public safety issues, whatever it is. But every one of you has paid tax through the sales tax. And this is, again, very common. So it's always funny. I always tell people, for those of you that are going to Washington, D.C., your first stop's going to be in Illinois, where the tax is 8.4%. And I say, why don't you wait until you get to Virginia or even Washington, D.C., where the sales tax is only 6% or 5%, where you pay less tax on your purchases? Hint, hint, wink, wink. Take that for whatever it's worth. And there you go. You can see a little bit closer. Chicago, 10%, 10.25% sales tax. Yeah, probably don't need to be buying a whole lot of stuff in Chicago. So here's a tariff, okay? And you've heard a lot about trade wars, and you've heard about sanctions and all kinds of stuff. Tariffs were a big thing during former President Trump's administration. He was putting a lot of tariffs on foreign goods, with China in particular, and then they were putting a lot of tariffs on us, which was driving prices up. And there's a couple of reasons why you do tariffing. Number one, you can do it to protect your local prices or your local products. Two, you can do it as a punishment for a country that maybe you're not getting along with or you're trying to influence some way. Or three, you can do it to either increase or stifle the amount of goods that are coming in, or just to create revenue off of a business that may be making a lot of money and has not been regulated very much. Think of it this way, though. As you can see in this one, if you've got an American-made cloth, it's $4 a roll. In Great Britain, it's $4 a roll. But if you add that tariff, that 25% tariff, and then you go to sell the British-made tariff, well, that tariff is going to get passed on to the consumer. So now it's going to be $5 a roll to sell the British cloth in the United States. Well, let me ask you this. If you're going to buy a whole bunch of rolls of cloth, which one are you going to want to buy? The American-made stuff at $4 or the British-made stuff at $5? Especially if it's any kind of comparable, meaning they are similar products, similar quality, similar everything. If one's way better quality, then that's one thing where you might pay more. But if they're exactly equal, most people will take the cheaper of the two options. So that's something to be aware of. I used to, and we'll do this in class sometime. I explain tariffs using cars, and we'll do that in class sometime. So where did all these greenbacks go? Well, as you can see, there's a very old picture of the current elementary, the old middle school, with one of the old vans there in the top right. There's a fire department. There's interstate highways, as you can see, buses, wastewater treatment plants. It goes for all those types of things. There's a lot of different things that our taxes pay for. The pool. Our taxes pay for the pool. Now you're thinking to yourself, now wait a second, we pay to get into the pool. Yes, but the pool actually does not raise enough money off of its admission fees to cover everything, so our taxes pay for that. They pay for the parks. They pay for the softball and baseball fields that you're playing on. They pay for the fireworks at Heartland Days. They pay for when you call 911. They're paying for the dispatcher to answer the phone and to have the infrastructure to be able to answer the phone. And when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about like the phone lines and all the stuff that makes it work, like the guts of the systems. All right. When you need an officer, taxes pay for that. Obviously, lately, military's been a big thing with things going on overseas. It's paying for that. Our taxes pay for that. There's a lot of things that we don't think about that our taxes are paying for that we're using every single day, whether it's plowing the road or whether it's driving on the road. That's all getting paid for by taxes. So that's where that money's going to end up going. Local taxes, you're going to see go towards stuff here in the county or in the city, within the schools. State taxes, that's where the money's going to go to Des Moines, and the decisions are going to be made where to send that out. State taxes pay for a lot of things. The Iowa DNR, the Iowa State Patrol, DOT, correctional institutes, all kinds of different things. And then, of course, the federal taxes, that's the money that's going to go to Washington, D.C. That's where we're talking about the U.S. Army. That's where we're talking about Social Security. We're talking about the U.S. Department of Agriculture. All of that stuff goes with that. Good example of that. USDA has different programs for farmers where they can get what's called a subsidy, meaning that they can get money back from the government if crops fail or if they put money in CRP or other different things where the U.S. government will subsidize farmers. That comes from tax money as well. So, I mean, there's just a 1.5 million different programs and things that money goes to.
Politicians have their own ideals and plans for how America should be run. And it may not sound like they're talking about money when they're campaigning, but the whole Democrat versus Republican thing is really about where American tax dollars should be going. So before you dive in on either side, it might be a good idea to get a handle on how we the people are currently spending our tax dollars. Before we start, there is a quick thing to note. These numbers are from 2013 and do not include Social Security or Medicare. The money for those programs is determined by the Federal Insurance Contributions Act tax and not the annual budget, so politicians can't do much to change the amount of taxes that go to those programs. Here are the programs that the federal budget does touch. Around 8 cents on every dollar goes toward paying interest on our debt. This is another one that's largely non-negotiable, but it's a significant amount and worth mentioning here. 17 cents out of every dollar is spent on government programs like subsidizing and supporting agriculture, commerce, transportation, and governmental administration, or on science and space technology, things like NASA and the National Science Foundation, international affairs, which includes things like the State Department and all non-military foreign aid. Some of the budget goes to responding to natural disasters or to community and regional development, which includes things like waste disposal and urban development. That 17 cents also goes to the environment, including the Parks Department and managing our natural resources and energy development, or to immigration, border control, and the Justice Department. We also have a program for education and jobs training. All of that combined accounts for the 17 cents out of every income tax dollar. And when you think about how many important programs we just mentioned, it really doesn't seem like a lot. So where is the real money going? Around 50% of our budget goes toward keeping our citizens healthy and out of poverty, which is a pretty good place for it to be. Almost 19 cents on every dollar is spent on jobs and family security. Things like unemployment insurance, food assistance, housing assistance, federal retirement funds, foster care, and temporary assistance for needy families. Veterans benefits also fall into this portion of the budget. They account for an additional 6 cents on every dollar. And healthcare programs like Medicaid, disease control, and numerous others account for an additional 25 cents. Again, that's half the budget. The well-being of our citizenship is something that most politicians can get behind. Something else most politicians can get behind is national defense, which accounts for almost 1/4 of our national budget. But before you get upset about how we are spending almost as much on the military as we are on medical services, let's talk a little bit about where that defense budget actually goes. Yes, the majority of it is spent on building weapons and conducting military operations, but 5.97% of it goes toward personnel salaries and benefits. That 6 cents is literally how we are supporting our troops. Some of that defense budget is also going towards maintaining our nuclear defense capabilities, and another portion of it is going to defense-related FBI activities. Plus, the U.S. military has almost 16,000 square miles of bases and facilities to maintain. So that 24.79% isn't all going towards bombs and invasions. Some of it is just there to maintain the troops, bases, and equipment we already have. If you found this video informative, please subscribe to the show. Subscribing is the best way to get these videos to you, and make sure that you see all 5.
All right, so there you go. That's a little bit of a breakdown on where our budgets go. All right. Again, the amount of taxes collected needs to be the same amount that is spent if we want to have a balanced budget. All right. Think about yourself. If you're going to get $5 and spend 10, where are you going to get the $5 to spend? How are you going to do that? Or if you get $10 and only spend 5, now you got $5 you can still spend on something else. Taxes work the same way. If you don't have a balanced budget, you're either going to be growing your income base or your tax base, or you're going to be shrinking it. And so having a balanced budget is a very good thing. The state of Iowa is very good about having a balanced budget. They are allowed to spend 99% of their budget each year. We've made rules for specifically that purpose. That means, although, that there are some hard decisions on what gets money and what doesn't. At the federal level, we are not required to have a balanced budget, and in fact, we do not and have not for a number of years had a balanced budget. We've been spending more than we've been taking in, and that's when you start hearing about being in debt to other countries. That's what we're talking about, borrowing from other countries. That's what's going on with that. And it takes some, then you'll hear about the national debt being in the $30 trillion range, I think right now. Maybe it's more than that, or maybe it's a little less. That's the amount of money that we owe to other countries. And so it's just something to be aware of. It's nothing we can fix today. It's nothing that we can fix in the next week, but it's something that we'll probably have to work on as we continue to be a society. So a surplus. Again, surpluses and deficits. A surplus is spending less than that's collected. You got $5, you only spent $4. Okay? And then there's deficit. It's where you spend more than you collect. And you can see here, there's only been a couple of years where we're seeing surpluses. And a lot of that, it's only about 4 years, and that was back that'd be like 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000. Otherwise, we've seen a lot of deficit spending. Now, that's, again, old numbers. I can't tell you exactly where Obama and Trump were on that, or Biden for that matter. I'd have to look that up. But on this chart, you can see there was a ton of deficit spending done by our Congress. And again, yes, the president's in office, but the president doesn't get to decide what money gets spent where. They have influence, but they don't get to just straight up decide. Congress gets to decide a lot of that stuff. So spending surpluses is what we like to see. That means we're spending less than we're collecting. All right, we're paying off debts. Deficits, not so good. It means we're digging ourselves into debt, and it can be very hard to come out of debt in those cases. And that's the thing. A lot of times we like to say, then this can get a little bit political, and I apologize for that, but you have to remember, low taxes are great, but if you have low taxes, that means you got to cut spending. Otherwise, you're growing your debt. High taxes are not fun, but higher taxes means either you can have more stuff or you can pay off debts. And finding the right balance of that is what you gotta is really the argument between Republicans and Democrats, where exactly we should be on that chart of things, or on that continuum, so to speak. Either option is possible, it's feasible, but you have to remember what that means. Again, cheap taxes means more money in my pocket, but it means as a country, we're either giving up services or we're growing our debt. High taxes means less money in my pocket, but it means that as a country, we are reducing our debt and or not having more services. That's up to each individual person to decide where they want to fall on that spectrum. National debt, you can see how it looks here. This is up and through 2014, I believe. And you can see how it has grown from 1940, where it was fairly low, now up into the trillions of dollars in 2000, I guess it's 2015 there. And it's grown since a lot. It's grown a lot since then. This is not an accurate number. It is much more than that. I want to say it's around 30,000, but I'll tell you what, if you want to click on that link down there, or if you want to not necessarily click on the link, but if you want to go to that site, you can find out exactly where it is for yourself. Okay, pay deductions, money taken from your check. Okay, there's going to be different things where you're going to have money deducted from your check. In other words, they're going to say, we're taking this, we're taking that, we're taking that, we're taking that, we're taking that. Okay, you can see here federal withholding. That's your federal income tax withholding. Now, you might get some of that back. If you've heard of a tax return, that's what we're talking about. Okay, money's held out at the end. If you paid in more than you needed to that way, then you'll get money back. Okay. And that's where you'll hear about the April 15th deadline for tax returns or tax filings, and then you can get that money back. Same thing with, and this isn't state withholding, that's Illinois, it's an Illinois company, but a state withholding, same thing there. Social Security and Medicare, you're not getting that back. Everybody pays in on that. That money doesn't come back. That pays for the Social Security and Medicare programs that we've talked about a little bit. Social Security pays out when you retire. I believe when you're 65, I think you can start drawing. And Medicare is basically health insurance for those that are, I think, 62 and over. It's a health insurance plan. And those are deductions. Now, there's many different deductions. Some of them aren't necessarily tax deductions or payroll deductions because of taxes. You can have other things taken out of your check as well for you might have, say, I don't know. You might have, what would you have? Health insurance, or if you have dues of some sort to pay, or some type of insurance type thing, or whatever, you can have things deducted for that. A tax deduction. This is what we were talking about with how kids are worth $8,000. There are different things you can deduct from your gross income, meaning the total amount of income you make in a year, you can deduct based on things that arise due to different types of expenses that occur to a taxpayer. Okay, so $8,000 per kid, that's a big one. All right. Sometimes they have tax deductions or tax credits, I should say, for like first responders. They'll have something like that, or for military stuff. Sometimes there's tax deductions for expenses that you have for running a business. That's where you hear someone say, "I write it off my taxes." They say it's a tax write-off. Right? They can deduct that from their gross income because they had to spend money to be able to conduct their business. Okay, and that's what a tax deduction is. Again, April 15th is the filing date. You've seen most of these different things. H&R Block, Edward Jones are in town. Liberty Tax Service, you may have seen. They've usually got somebody standing outside with dressed as a Statue of Liberty. You've probably heard of Quicken or TurboTax. Jackson Hewitt, I think, is still around. Not here in town, but I think they're still around. But TurboTax and Quicken are both computer programs that will help you do your taxes. They're all available to help you with that stuff. H&R Block, Edward Jones, Liberty Tax Service, you're going to take your stuff in and you're going to end up paying them to do your taxes. Where Quicken and TurboTax, you pay the subscription fee and then you just get whatever you submit. This is what the forms look like, a 1040 EZ. And then on the right here is what's called a W-2. You may have heard of that. What happens is this form here is what you fill out to determine how much you have to pay. If you're just doing the easy form with very, very few deductions. On the right, this comes from your employer. So at the end of the year, your employer, or the very beginning of the year actually, your employer is going to give you a W-2 with all of this information. It's going to be the amount of information that the amount of money you made. It's going to have how much tax you had withheld and whatnot. It's going to have Social Security, all that stuff. It's all going to be listed on here. Okay. And then this is the information that you're going to use to fill stuff out over here as you start to determine how much you're going to have to pay. Okay. Now, we may, if we have a chance later on, work on doing some of these, but we're not to that point just yet. So we'll wrap it up there. Folks, taxes. No one likes paying them, but I think everybody knows that we have to sometimes, and that's just the nature of the beast. But glad you tuned in, glad you listened in, and if you have questions, let's talk about it.